But I would say to your listeners, if you're going through this, to go ahead and if there's a treatment provider or a psychiatrist, or when you're in a situation where you're feeling like Mindy, where they don't even know what I look like, to go ahead and say, I would like to just tell you about my loved one. I would like to send you a picture. I would like to send you an email. I would like to because the other thing that's not happening, I think, is we're not humanizing people here.
Back by popular listener demand, Leah Brennan is a licensed marriage and family therapist and certified alcohol and other drug counselor. And she joins us tonight for part 2 of one of our most popular episodes, where she asks the 3 moms about what life is like living with someone with schizophrenia in the family. We'll talk about HIPAA, we'll talk about early detection, and a whole lot more. Welcome. Welcome to our podcast, Schizophrenia, 3 Moms in the Trenches. From the place where schizophrenia and real life collide. East Coast, West Coast, Middle America. With Miriam Feldman, Mindy Greiling, and Randy Kay. Finally, a place to talk about the truth. This is episode 63. It's a part 2 of an episode 55 that was so popular. People kept saying, when is your guest coming back? So we will be talking again with Leah Brennan, LMFT, CADC, more about what families want therapists to know about schizophrenia. So we're going to turn the tables again, and Leah Brennan will ask us questions. We're down one mom tonight, Mimi, who is always traveling, finally got stuck with an airport delay and couldn't make the podcast. So it's 2 moms in the trenches and 1 therapist in the trenches tonight. So hi, Mindy. I understand you had a book event this week. Tell us about it.
Yes, it was a very exciting book event because it was like 150 some people, and I got to sign real books, which of course is for a treat for all of us with our COVID rollouts. But the part that was really unusual was they made, and for the people watching on YouTube, I'm going to show them, they made mugs with my book cover on it, which I thought was really cool. So, and they sent me home with a set of 8. So now I have, everybody can come to my house and have coffee with Fix What You Can mugs. So it was a treat.
And did you say 150 people showed up?
It was a huge event. It was a lot of groups sponsored it. It was, the main host was AAUW, but they networked with many organizations, NAMI in their area, and other groups, Friends of the Library. They had about 8 or 10 co-sponsors. So they really, and it was a greater Minnesota. You know how there's more people that come when you're out in greater Minnesota, you know, when you're out of the metro area. So there's many other choices. Plus they had really good marketing. They had me on the radio ahead of time. They'd had posters all over town. It was, and then after I spoke about my book and our family's experience, then they had a panel of 6 local mental health experts, including their Wilmer, Minnesota, Leah Brennan. And they had answers for people who wanted to know locally, how could they get services? And I have to say, every single provider had a waiting list, and not a short one.
Yes, I have no doubt. So if this is your first episode with us, that was Mindy Greiling. And as you heard, her book is Fix What You Can, which came out in 2020, right?
Yes.
Launching a book during COVID, always fun. So you can stretch out the book launches. You know, all of us are available for events like this. Our absent Mimi Feldman, her book is He Came In With It, which also came out in 2020. I'm Randy Kay, and my book is Ben Behind His Voices. That came out in 2011, but an updated version came out in audiobook only last year. So we love to come out and meet the public, and either all 3 of us together or any combination. Mindy lives, I'll just say, in the Midwest, so but it's Minnesota, and Mimi travels all over anyway, but she's basically on the West Coast and I'm on the East Coast, and we love to meet you and share our stories, and those are our books. So that's awesome. I'm so glad you had it finally. The
Yeah.
book launch you should have had 3 years ago. That is
That's right.
fantastic. So when I see you, I want a mug.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Each other. We've never actually met in person. I've never seen Mimi or Randy in person.
Nope, not yet. Mimi and I met briefly at a barbecue at Dr. Laitman's, and we'll fix that one of these days. But I still feel like you're a dear friend, so we get a big
Definitely.
hug when we meet in person.
That's
So
for sure.
I want to welcome back a guest that was on. It seems like not that long ago, but since these days we're only doing 2 a month, it was a bit. So it was episode 55. And if you're watching on YouTube, you can already see Leah. So Leah, wave. But Leah is a licensed marriage and family therapist and a certified alcohol and other drug counselor. And the last episode we did where she wanted to turn the tables and ask us questions had such a great response that on our Facebook page, which you're welcome to join, by the way, and our new Instagram account at Schizophrenia 3 Moms, trenches, just search Schizophrenia 3 Mom Trenches and you'll find it. People were going, well, where's part 2? Because the last thing we said was we have to have you back. So by popular demand, Leah is back. She got connected to us through her clients and realized that she wanted to know more from us who are not clients of hers about how to help her clients. She got a lot of questions. So Leah, I just want to start by welcoming you back.
Thank you.
And what was your experience with us on episode 55? Did you get a reaction? Did you learn something? Like, what stands out for you?
Oh my gosh. I thought it was one of the best hours of my life. I mean, I just had so much. I was very, it was very thought-provoking, very stimulating. And I thought I felt very lucky to have gotten to be connected to the 3 of you. And I'm bummed that Mimi is not here tonight, but it was such an elucidating educational hour and a half for me, however long that lasted. And I'm thrilled to be asked back. It was exactly what personally I wanted. And I, just because, like I said, in our last meeting, I realized how much I don't know and how much I feel ethically obligated to expand that knowledge, because this is showing up in my caseload and it's showing up in my, therapists that I work with in consultation. It's showing up on their caseload. And as I look back over the course of my career so far, I'm just realizing, wow, there was just such a kind of a gap in my education. So the time we spent together helped me start to fill that gap. And I feel like I've done a lot of my own reading and research since then. And I just feel like there's even more I don't know.
But I applaud your interest and wanting to continue to learn.
Well, and I've listened, I keep listening to the podcast. So I listened to the most recent one where you guys had all the other moms on.
The stories?
The stories from the listeners.
Yes, we're doing another one of those in July, I think. So
I was so moved. And I felt I had to pause it a few times just to kind of recalibrate and kind of recover. It just was so heartbreaking, but also, inspiring, the resiliency and the tenacity and the love that these people have for their kids and that you guys have for them. And it's truly, truly inspirational what you guys are doing here. Really. Yeah.
Thank you so much. We keep hearing from people, and there is another project, and I will put it in the show notes because I have nothing in front of me except your 3, our 3 faces. There is a project where I have written a letter to my son, and he has asked people to write letters to their loved ones with serious mental illness, and it's going to be published. It's coming out. I think Kathy Day is going to endorse it. And so the piece that I wrote for this book is locally for Mental Health Awareness Month. They're going to be doing a play reading, and people have written pieces about mental illness. So they accepted my piece. My first thing as a playwright, I'm not acting it out. I just wrote a little play. So, awareness continues, and we want to continue doing the work we're doing so that people like you can do the good work that you're doing. So thank you. So let's dive in. What would you like to know from Mindy and Randy?
Okay. Well, as you guys know, there's so much. I still have a lot of questions, but the thing that's been on my mind the most, I mean, I know we talked a lot about HIPAA last time, and I've done a lot of kind of my own, went back and kind of recovered what I learned in HIPAA, talked to other clinicians about what they have learned and what they've come to believe, and just kind of what we think we know. And 201, everybody was just, everybody who was kind of raised in family systems therapy, like I was, where we think about, even if there's just one person in front of us in the clinical room, we think about the entire family, and how dynamics are at interplay, and they intersect and they bounce back and forth among the family members. All of us still remember and are very grounded in the idea of, no, we want to talk to the family members, or we want to hear from them, at least if it's HIPAA protected, or we're feeling like we can't share the content of the sessions with them. We can at least ask them, tell me what you're seeing. Tell me what you're thinking about. Tell me what I don't know that you can tell me that'll help me treat your loved one. We are all thinking that way. But the thing that struck me the most was everybody, we all talked about it, acknowledged we feel this tiptoe around HIPAA. So somewhere along the line, it has gotten really ingrained. You don't mess with that. You don't push on it. You don't challenge it. And that to me is where I'm kind of mainly sitting, because I really heard loud and clear from you guys and some of the other episodes, not just the one that I was on with you, where I was on last time, but the other episodes about HIPAA, how problematic that is.
Because people are, I believe, more careful than they need to be.
Right. And so there's something.
I think HIPAA is just probably the most hurtful thing that there is when you're dealing with someone you love, and the people who are trying to help them are not talking to you. I think I may have said on our last episode, our son has had many therapists, and not a one has ever spoken a word other than possibly hello. And most I don't even know what they look like. There was no reaching out. And that's the case with many providers. I think therapists probably have the hardest road to hoe because of the nature of your relationship. But the psychiatrists, the nurses, everybody, the idea that this is your son and he's very, very sick, and then no one will talk to you. It's just an added layer of grief.
An added layer of grief. And it's such a wealth of information that we're missing out on when we don't actually just say, just talk to me. Because there's no HIPAA violation there. When a clinician says to a loved one or a family member, you tell me what you're thinking and seeing, I've got 15 minutes, I won't charge you. Or even if I wanted to charge you, I could say, let's work it out. But I really do feel like I'm missing a lot of information. I think you have a lot of the stuff I'm missing. Please fill in the puzzle pieces.
So I love that. So what's the solution? Is it just educating practitioners about what HIPAA actually is and what they can do? Is it educating families as to what they can offer? Is it both of those? Do we need to legislate in any way? Or are the laws on the books and it's just people don't understand? What's the solution here? How can we spread more awareness that HIPAA may not be what you think it is?
I think I think it's both. Talking to clinicians. I mean, on my end, what I want to have been and what I will continue and want to continue doing is talking to the clinicians that I know, connections to training facilities to say, hey, if I'm ever, available to come and, do a talk for one of the lectures, to say, here's how to get out of the program, and here's how to go into private practice, or here's how to go into, career advisement kind of stuff. That would be an opportunity to bring it up and talk about it. But I would say to your listeners, if you're going through this, to go ahead and if there's a treatment provider or a psychiatrist, or when you're in a situation where you're feeling like Mindy, where they don't even know what I look like, to go ahead and say, I would like to just tell you about my loved one. I would like to send you a picture. I would like to send you an email. I would like to because the other thing that's not happening, I think, is we're not humanizing people here. This is a person in my room. They have a mom and a dad, or they have parents, they have caregivers, maybe they have siblings, maybe they have nieces and nephews. Let's humanize you. Let's really dive in and get to know the richness of your life besides you just being symptomatic. And also how do you kind of connect to all of that? Maybe you're in a psychotic episode, but can't we talk about the vacation you took when you were 12? I heard about it from your mom. Is that okay? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, humanizing is, and I know it's difficult when it's, a shell of the person they used to be, but they're still in there. I know when our listeners know that my son Ben, after 9 years of fairly good success, working full time, leasing a car, off Social Security, he crashed during COVID again and was almost 6 months in the hospital, and it took a long time to get him stable again. And he's not where he was, but I brought pictures to the hospital, and they were lovely. And they tried to see the young man under the symptoms, but the face is different when you're feeling emotions and feeling joy, and you don't have that blunt affect. And so just like when my mother was ill and I had to bring pictures, here's a person, look, she's a person, look, we love her. So I did bring pictures, and they were all, I think it brought tears to their eyes. They were, oh, that's who he is. So thank you for that. So
I've had pretty good luck at the actual hospital. When Jim is in crisis, that is a time when people talk to the family a little more. It's more the leading up to crisis when you really want to stop that crisis. And that's when you have the most trouble. The staff often aren't willing to think that he's going to crash. And as a mother, I know when he's going to crash. And that's when it becomes really frustrating, when no one will listen to you. Then once they crash, then the family's more welcome. Well, we should help with this then. But you kind of want to have some early intervention at times too.
And that's one of my questions is what hold on one second.
yeah, go through the list. It's fine.
Yeah. Who should therapists alert and educate in the larger community before kids reach the age when symptoms of severe mental illness typically start to manifest? So it's a broader question than what we just talked about, but I think a parallel process, I think that's spot on to say, again, maybe if there's folks out there who are listening who have had multiple hospitalizations or can already see the pink flag starting to turn red, I don't know what would stop you from emailing your treatment provider or your child's treatment provider, your loved one's treatment provider, to just say, hey, I know you can't divulge anything to me because of HIPAA, or maybe they don't know that, but I want to tell you X, Y, and Z happened yesterday, or the last 3 weeks I've noticed what I've noticed, whatever those flags are.
I'm not sure I understand the question. So you're asking us if there's things the family members can do to alert people, or if there's things the therapist should do to alert people. What's your question?
So my broader question is, I would want to hear from you guys. What are you thinking about that the larger treatment community, therapists, psychiatrists, hospital staff, psychiatric nurses, what do we need to know so that we know what we're looking for before most patients are at the age 19, 20, 21, where we're really going to see the manifestations of the symptoms? It's like a preemptive, what are we looking for?
I just talked to a mother today. I'm not sure if this will get at the question or not, but I spent 2 hours with a mother who has a 27-year-old son with bipolar disorder. And he got sick when he was 13. And all through school, she kept begging for help. And the system was telling her, you do not want the stigma of a psychiatric label. So let's just try to work on, getting him through. And they just resisted labeling him as having bipolar disorder or even having a mental illness. When he was 18, he was almost immediately charged with a felony. And now he's in prison. He has 7 felonies. And so my thought was, and she certainly thinks this, how stigmatizing is that, to be in prison? So this tippy-toeing around not wanting to stigmatize someone with a mental health diagnosis means they can't get any medications, they can't get help, the family can't get educated if they don't know which mental illness, or if it is a mental illness they're dealing with. All of that, I think anybody helping dealing with younger people, younger than 18, could really get ahead of that by, I always would rather that people would say, here are the symptoms of drug use, here's what normal teen behavior is. And sometimes these are blurred or mixed up with oncoming mental illnesses, and those are real. This is the age when boys get sick and so forth. I think we have to face it, educate everybody, name it, and then we can all, as families, hope we're not the ones that end up with mental illness. But to be silent on it, or to not label a child when they obviously have a mental illness, I think is misplaced, trying to be nice to people, and then you get disastrous results later.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody wants to be the deliverer of possibly bad news.
Sure.
So I remember a friend of mine, it was a pediatrician. She's since retired. And I said, oh, isn't your job so much fun? Cute babies, and she says, well, it's fun until somebody's child is seriously ill and you have to break the news to them.
Mm-hmm.
That's the not fun part of the job, or what you're doing doesn't work. And I imagine for therapists and psychiatrists, that news is particularly difficult. But I think in terms of early detection, we've mentioned this before, but school therapists should be alert to the signs, should be open to meeting with family members as necessary to learn more about what's going on. And if someone had said to me, like, I don't know if this is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, because it could be a lot of things. Like Mindy was saying, it's all mixed up. I thought I had an extreme adolescent. If someone had said, here, educate yourself about this illness, because you're the one that's there 24/7 and you see the symptoms. And I'm not saying it's this, but I'm saying there's a chance it's this. And that's not easy news to give you. But I'd like you to learn about it, so that if it is a serious mental illness, if it is bipolar or schizophrenia, if we catch it early, there's a chance that it really won't affect your son's life as much as it will if we wait.
Yeah.
There was an episode when my son was, I want to say about 15, and he was just like, do I go to school? Do I not go to school? And he was very active in his youth group and very happy out of school, but not in school. So I thought, oh, he's got ADD, and so he's not doing well academically. So his ego and his confidence. But there was one time we just had a fight. He was going to run away, then he wasn't going to run away, and the things we go through. And he was looking through old photos, and then he looked up at me with tears in his eyes, which was unusual at that point, and says, Mom, I don't understand. I used to be so happy. I have to go take a walk and figure out why I'm not happy anymore. And for that child, my heart breaks, because early intervention might have, not that I would have loved to hear the possibility of schizophrenia, but after I got over hearing the news, it would have opened my eyes to what else it might be.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that not shoving it under the rug would be a very good thing. And maybe having school education programs, general school education programs, where people are educated about these illnesses and what to look for and how important early detection is.
Mm-hmm. I think that's so spot on. And I liked what you said about, here's how I would have been able to kind of absorb it. If the clinician or the service provider was saying, this isn't easy to say, I'm sure it's not, I know it's not easy to hear, but I want you to be as prepared as possible,
Just in case.
Just in case. And saying even, Mindy, to your point of, it's really stigmatizing to have 7 felonies versus a diagnosis. It made me realize I had 2 trains of thought. One was clearly we need to continue to work on reducing and eliminating the stigma around all mental illness. I mean, even just the language of saying, I'm not bipolar, or my loved one isn't bipolar. My loved one lives with bipolar or has this diagnosis. There's other dimensions to their personality. There's other dimensions to their life besides the diagnosis. I know this looms large, schizophrenia, obviously, but to also say, you know, my child and my loved one is much more than just the diagnosis. When I was going through grad school, one thing we were taught around diagnosing minors and being really careful was around, you know, mental health care in the United States being, you know, insurance, the way the mental health coverage works. If you offer a diagnosis to someone and then at some point they change insurance because they changed jobs or they were a minor and then they became, you know, an adult, that diagnosis might follow them and make them harder to make it harder for them to get insurance. And
well, we can get into everything that's wrong with the system, but that is definitely one of them, you know.
whole podcast, right?
Yeah. So, but we want to help you become the best therapist that you can be. So these are all really important points. And we have a lot of topics coming up in future episodes that we're covering, including why isn't there more research done into this? We're interviewing Dr. Jeffrey Lieberman, the author of Malady of the Mind. We have a lot of episodes coming up to talk about the system. Not that we can fix it, but we can point out the discrepancies.
Sure.
But you are one of the good guys and one of the heroes and one of the people who really do care. And I applaud what you do. So what else can we answer for you as sort of general moms that you haven't maybe had a chance to ask your other families?
So the other big pressing thing is also just to talk a little bit more. I'd love to learn or hear a little more about how you both think about THC, marijuana use with severe mental illness. And I'm asking this from my experience with some of my families and my clients, where this was a self-coping, you know, a self-treatment kind of coping mechanism, and how it was seen as a good thing and how it turned out to be maybe not so much a good thing, depending. So I would love to hear a little bit more about how you both think about that.
That's a hot button topic for me because of all this legalization and it's going on everywhere, including my state of Minnesota. And I am strongly opposed to legalizing marijuana before age 25. And I'm fine with the decriminalization. And that's a portion of what's going on in Minnesota, where they could decriminalize, not have people clogging up the jails and prisons for low-level drug offenses with marijuana. But I'm convinced that it accelerated, exacerbated, and possibly even had a big hand in causing Jim's schizophrenia. And he thinks that too. It was definitely a gateway drug. There's no way he stopped at marijuana, but that's definitely where he started. And Joe Camel was also influential in his high school days because he started smoking just plain cigarettes. And there was he got a t-shirt with Joe Camel on it. He still remembers, I intercepted the mail, which he thought was illegal, and threw it away, but he still got other things. And then on to the marijuana, and then on to most every other drug that he tried in high school. And now, speaking of Dr. Lieberman's book, which I just read recently, he has devoted his life to studying schizophrenia for the last 50 plus years. And he said when he was first asked about marijuana and did it cause serious mental illnesses, he kind of laughed and said no. And he's come full circle to say not only does it cause psychosis, it causes schizophrenia. And that's a further leap than the expert that we had on a year or two ago who just said it caused psychosis. Dr. Lieberman said it causes schizophrenia. And it can cause schizophrenia even in people that don't have a predisposition. So it's a very serious thing. I don't think people have a clue, generally speaking, how dangerous this is because of the effect on young minds.
Wow. So when we have Dr. Lieberman on, we'll have to talk about that at greater length. There is always I don't want to turn this political, but I will say that there's also the side of things that are like, well, if it's legalized, then it can be controlled so that they're not going to have fentanyl in the marijuana. So that I'm not going to say one thing or the other about legalization of medical marijuana. I think that my son he got it when it was illegal, and he could get it now, the stuff that you can't get in the medical stores. So recreational, but I'm all for the decriminalization. And I said I wasn't going to get political, but I just did. But anyway, that is very interesting to me because my son was a huge pot smoker. It did not lead to other drugs in high school. But even now, listeners know that about 4 or 5 months ago, he cooked up an idea that he was going to leave his safe and warm group home and just camp. I'm doing air quotes. If you're not watching on YouTube, he was going to camp. In other words, he was going to choose to be homeless and live on the streets. And he cooked up this great idea while high. So anytime he makes a not smart decision, he's usually pretty good with his money. But this month he wasn't. He bought 2 impulse items and then started asking me for money. And all I did was help him return the items. But, they cook up ideas that seem smart when they're smoking pot. Mm-hmm. And given his druthers, he would live a life high. That's what he would do. So I'm not a fan. I don't know what we can do about it. But I really think the way marijuana is now and the things that are added to it and the strength of it could definitely cause psychosis. And now I'm just hearing for the first time might cause schizophrenia. How do you keep teens away from it? I have no idea. Educate them and hope they make a good decision. Leah, so we're not fans of marijuana.
I hear you,
especially for that reason.
Well, and what's helpful to hear about that is then kind of helping me be a little more armed and a little more, hey, let's really talk about this, whether it's your loved one or if the person in my office is actually someone who's symptomatic or, in and out or, whatever the case might be, to just say, here's what we do know, that it's a risk factor. And I think what I want to share, though, is what I often hear is, but this is something I've always used, or I used when I was younger, that helped me feel better. Mm-hmm. And I, as brains develop, we know that they change. We know that substances, you don't, if you're not getting the consistent exact same product every time, you're not getting the exact same product every time. So your high and your set and your setting are going to be a little bit different. So just to kind of have a little bit more ammunition to kind of say, this is not a good idea. This is not an adaptive coping mechanism.
Okay. And I have educated our granddaughter, who's a freshman in college, and actually Jim has helped to educate her too, both by example, but also he's very concerned that she might use marijuana. So we have definitely had an impact because whether she's tried it once just for the heck of it or not, I don't know, but I do know she's not a marijuana user. She's very worried about, getting schizophrenia with Jim as her relative, and everybody has more than one relative. And so does she. Now that she's at college, she has seen a therapist herself. Probably 2/3 of the kids in college are, and it's just anxiety, depression, COVID, the stress of college. But thankfully, she doesn't have the added disadvantage that Jim had of scrambling up her brain with marijuana. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh, she did actually learn from that. She said she's tried to share that information with friends and they don't listen.
Exactly my point. So, but there was no one deterrent to drunk driving. It's a little of this, it's a little of that, it's a little education here, it's a little breathalyzer there. So we have to arm ourselves with all the tools that we can, and knowledge is one of those, certainly. Leah, we have about 10, 15 minutes left. So what else are you burning to ask us?
So what I'm, so my other, I can't believe how fast this goes. The other thing, I kind of made a joke at one point, I think when we were first kind of going back and forth about getting together, having me on, and the joke that I'd sort of made was, when do you all want to get on a bus and go to the respective capital cities where the legislators are in your states and kind of talk? And I really, this came back up after I listened to the episode where I was listening to your, the stories from the listeners.
Mm.
I was like, if there was a way we could just teleport into everybody's state capital, it's I'm not sure exactly how to frame the question. I think you understand what I'm asking. If you guys think that's worth it, if you're already, I mean, Mindy, I know you're already, you were a legislator in Minnesota, so you were already the person whose office we might land in. What would you say? What should we say if we go?
Well, I will say one thing that is an issue, in that in many cases, it is the relatives of people with the illness that are going to advocate, not the people with the illness. There are people like Jim now with schizophrenia who are aware they have it, and we've had a few of them on the show. But my son wouldn't be a poster child for schizophrenia recovery because, as far as he's concerned, he doesn't have schizophrenia. Why would you label me with that stigma? So the advocacy, let's do it. Absolutely. And tell our stories. Absolutely. But the problem we come across is we don't have a poster child for that, because many people, the people who are doing well with it and accept it, are doing well with it. It's the people who, my son, who without me would be homeless or dead or in jail, that don't know to come and advocate for themselves. And so that makes that sort of storytelling difficult because it's told secondhand so many times. I don't want to come at you with an obstacle. We certainly, this whole podcast is about advocacy, but that is one of the problems with the stigma. We don't have representatives of people who have the illness that are held back by the illness because they don't want to speak up.
The mental health system, when you're looking at people with lived experience who have mental illnesses, is designed by everybody but the ones with schizophrenia. You might have somebody, we've had really high functioning people on this program, but they are the exception. And so people like our sons, all three of our sons on this podcast, aren't the ones at the table, like Randy said. So the mental health system is skewed towards those who seek care. We don't have people represented who have anosognosia. Why would we, when they think they don't have an illness? So our whole system is designed for those who will call 988, who will make an appointment with a therapist, who will go to the hospital, who will take their medication. And we shy away from the kind of care like Mayor Adams is looking for in New York City, because that looks coercive, that looks overbearing to people who aren't dealing with anosognosia. And the mental health system doesn't agree. But people like us, and we did have Brian Stetton on this program recently, who wrote the plan for Mayor Adams, and we all agreed that it's compassionate care when people don't know they're sick. They're very, very sick. They're possibly not dressed for the weather. They're unhoused. They're not eating properly. They're victims. They're drug users, substance abusers. All those things, the kind thing, the compassionate thing would be to get them care, whether they know they need it or not. And that's not who our system is designed for. So the very sickest people are the ones who mostly are the last on the list to get care with our current mental health system.
Well, that makes sense. It is hard to it's hard to hear that, but it makes sense. It's kind of like the easier to treat. It's easier to treat somebody who's going to say, yeah, I'm receptive to it, and I want it, and I will. You might need to convince me. There might need to be some incentives. There might need to be some interventions along the way, but I'm pretty much on board.
Yeah.
But to me, I hear that and I say, well, that's part of the education. Again, if some of us are going to go back and talk to the graduate programs and say, hey, let's reframe HIPAA. Let's get a little more accurate around HIPAA. I think we can still also, in the same vein, go back to our legislators and say things like what you just said. Did you know there's a whole other population that's even harder to reach, but that I think we're ethically bound to compassionately reach them and their families?
And I'm, as some of our listeners know, I'm working in Minnesota with two legislators, senator and a representative, on this very issue, that we're bringing something forward next year. NAMI, Minnesota passed a really good provision in the civil commitment law here to engage people earlier before they reach criteria for involuntary care, but it wasn't funded, and so no county has opted in. So we're working on that, as well as more accountability for the civil commitment system. We've gotten so skewed to patient-centered care, which is a really good thing for people who know they're sick and are directing their care. But for someone who doesn't think they're sick at all and their choice is to have no care, it doesn't work well. So to have some accountability for the civil commitment law, we're working on as well.
Yeah. Can I ask you one question, Leah?
Yeah.
I know I was going to ask you, we talked earlier before the show, because many of our listeners have asked for a show about what if your significant other has schizophrenia. And although we're three moms in the trenches, I certainly would, love to do a show about that. But that hasn't been your clinical experience at this point. But you do counsel families. And obviously, without giving away any names or stories, have you ever found that a serious mental illness in a child can break up a marriage, that there can be difficulties between the husband and wife, or husband and husband, or wife and wife?
Yeah.
Do you have any tips for a family that is being torn apart by differing ideas about mental illness? Surprise question.
Yeah, I have seen that, and it is so heartbreaking. And I think it's my one tip I would have is to say, there's not another adult on earth that loves this person the way you do, that understands what you're going through, because there's only one other parent. It's even if it's my spouse and me having this conflict, I've got to remember there's nobody else on earth that understands our child the way my co-parent does. And I would say the same thing back to that person. I just, my heart goes out to folks who are in that situation, because it's, everything we're talking about here, we're talking about nuance, we're talking about complication, we're talking about the uniqueness of everybody's brain. Everybody with this diagnosis is still a unique brain and a unique heart and a unique human. And there might be something else going on in that couple relationship where, it's a pretty not normative experience to raise a child through adulthood with a severe mental illness. So first, I would maybe start to say, I would want to normalize and validate how hard this is, especially if you've got two really different ways of thinking about how to navigate it or address it. I would encourage both parents to get into their own individual therapy as well as couples therapy. I would encourage them to slow down on splitting up. Maybe if there's a 3-month or a 6-month period where we can agree to just kind of take the splitting up idea off the table until maybe the child is more stable, if they're not at the time. And
NAMI family to family could be recommended. Sometimes just educating the whole family together. I have seen couples come into an 8-week class disagreeing loudly about what's wrong with their child and coming out at the other side going, oh. And so that education can be really helpful as well.
100%. And an exploration of what is your worst fear? And where in your history did you encounter this before? Because usually when there's that strong of a reaction, there's something else that's historical before the couple got married and got pregnant and had the baby.
Mhm.
There might have been something else in their background that this is just a family lore, maybe from 3 generations back, where this is now my reaction to this is fixed. And if I'm not processing that or exploring that or getting educated about that.
All right. Thank you. So we're pretty much out of time. Is there any, do you have another minute to just ask us a real quick fire question? If you have anything else.
I don't have a question so much. I don't have a question so much as just, admiration and just, it's amazing. I feel like, the world is really thirsty for this from you guys. And I'm so glad you're willing and able to do it. And I guess my question is what's your self-care? How do you replenish after rough days or rough weeks?
I sleep a lot. I read a lot. I walk a lot. I have a lot of friends who I walk with and talk with. And I'm in 2 groups of 5 moms where we share monthly what's gone on in the past month and troubleshoot who we can help the most. And always someone is in crisis in each group. And often the rest of us aren't, so we can help.
Wonderful. Wow.
I have learned to throw away the adage, you're only as happy as your unhappiest child, because I work hard to not let my happiness hinge on Ben's happiness. I do my best to take care of him and make him happy. And if he's having a bad day, and it's easier right now that he's not living with us, but I have chosen to be happy anyway. I have good days and bad days, but I have other, as I've said to him, if there's times when I don't want him to visit because his behavior is erratic, I say, I love you and I will always love you. I have a lot of other people I love too, including me, and I have to take care of them as well. And so I'm going to make the best decision I can. So I've learned to compartmentalize when I can. And if we have a good day, I just store it in the attic to revisit. I said, great, we got one more day to make good memories. And I look for that and enjoy the other joys in my life and know that if the other shoe falls, I'll know what to do.
Mm-hmm. And as for me, I wallow in the adage, you're only as happy as your least happiest child. When Jim is in the tubes, I am in the tubes. Sorry to say, I can, all my compartmentalizing, all my friends, everything I could possibly do. If Jim thinks I'm the Antichrist or is relapsed into substance abuse, I am dead.
That's honest.
Yeah.
And I get it. Well, thank goodness for people who go into legislating and advocating and being a practitioner like you, Leah. Thank you so much for joining us today. And I'm not going to promise a part 3 right now, but you're welcome back anytime because listeners loved your last episode. So thank you for what you do.
Thank you both, and say hi to Mimi. And it's just wonderful to be back. And I so appreciate what you guys are doing. It's amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks for joining us for this episode of Schizophrenia, 3 Moms in the Trenches with Randy Kay, Mindy Greiling, and Miriam Feldman. To get in touch with us or to learn more about our books, please visit our websites at miriam-feldman.com, mindygreiling.com, or randykay.com.